Welcome to the Native Americans section of our video series. In the next few minutes, I'll be guiding you through the complex history of Native Americans' rights and opportunities from the eras of the Gilded Age to the era of World War II. With white settlers traveling west via the Oregon and California trails, which crossed through Native American land, some battles between the Indians and whites ensued. In an attempt to destroy the core of the Native American economy, white American settlers, including experienced military officials, made it their goal to eliminate the buffalo, a critical staple of Indian life and prosperity during the Gilded Age. As a result of this scheme to cripple the Native Americans' economy, in under 20 years, the number of buffalo in the plains of the United States decreased from tens of millions to a number so low that finding 25 was extremely difficult. This represented a huge decrease in the opportunity of Native Americans because nearly their entire livelihood was destroyed by white settlers. Through examining the continued practice of relocating Native Americans to reservations, specifically in Oklahoma, one can notice additional contractions of Indians' rights during the Gilded Age. For example, after white settlers had already encroached upon its land, the Nez Perce tribe, led by Chief Joseph, tried to flee from ensuing battles over land with whites, only to be stopped by other white Americans, forced to surrender and relocated to Oklahoma. This represents a crucial contraction of Native Americans' rights because their freedom of movement was taken away from them. Cool. Chief Joseph later addressed the hopelessness that his people felt from their white-imposed lack of opportunity in an 1879 speech in Washington, D.C. Chief Joseph said, "When I think of our condition, my heart is heavy. I see men of my race treated as outlaws and driven from country to country or shot down like animals. I know that my race must change. We cannot hold our own with the white men as we are. We only ask an even chance to live as other men live. Let me be a free man, free to travel, free to stop, free to work, free to trade where I choose, free to follow the religion of my fathers, free to think and talk and act for myself, and I will obey every law or submit to the penalty." This suffering from a lack of rights and opportunities was not unique to Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce tribe. White farmers and settlers had been exploiting Indians and taking their lands for years, concentrating them into reservations where they lived in crushing poverty. This oppression was also perpetrated by members of the United States government. Almost all American officials thought it was the government's place to coerce or force the Native Americans of the Great Plains into surrendering their land and abandoning their culture, property, and traditional ways of life for American and Christian ideals. In 1871, the desire of Americans to force Indians into cultural assimilation manifested itself into the elimination of the traditional treaty system between Native Americans and the United States that treated Indians as separate nations of people. This step contributed in the government's ability to continue in their course of oppressing the United States as Native peoples. Soon afterwards, the Bureau of Indian Affairs set up boarding schools where Indian children would exchange their traditional names and clothing for white values. In addition to being forced to live on reservations, Indians also suffered at the hands of one of the most oppressive laws passed by the U.S. government against them, the Dawes Act. Passed in 1887, the Dawes Act broke up Native Americans' tribal land and redistributed some of it to individual Indian families in an attempt to do away with their traditional system of tribally shared land and impose a system that is more American. The majority of the land was not even given back to the Native Americans, but rather auctioned off to wealthy white Americans who could afford to buy it. The Dawes Act proved to be a huge contraction of the rights and opportunities of Native Americans, while simultaneously bringing a great deal of benefit to the white people. The Dawes Act, in a guise of offering opportunity to Native Americans, also granted Indians full U.S. citizenships if they accepted the redistributed plots of land and thusly forfeited their centuries-old culture. However, because tribal identity and culture was such an integral part of Indian society that hardly anyone wanted to give it up, very few Native Americans actually benefited from the offers of citizenship granted by the Dawes Act. It wasn't until 1924, almost 40 years after the passage of the Dawes Act, and almost 150 years after the founding of the United States, that all Native Americans became full citizens. This obviously is a great success for the Native peoples of the nation, for they gained the opportunities and rights that come with being an American citizen. However, it is a shame that it took so long for these people to achieve the citizenship that white immigrants from Europe were able to grant to their children simply if they were born on U.S. soil. The era of the New Deal represented a time of far greater opportunities and rights for Native Americans than the Gilded Age did. During the New Deal, the policy of forced assimilation was ended, and the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, John Collier, allowed Indians a much larger amount of cultural autonomy. He also did away with the oppressive boarding schools that were established during the Gilded Age, and replaced them with real schools on real reservations, and increased spending on the public health of Native Americans. In 1934, with the passage of the Indian Reorganization Act, the Dawes Act's policy of creating, redistributing, and selling parcels of formerly Indian land was done away with, and in the following years, Native Americans' rights to govern themselves were more fully recognized by members of the American government. However, although the New Deal did bring some benefit, prosperity, rights, and opportunities to the Native peoples of the United States, many of its programs overlooked or excluded the Indians and their interests. For example, the construction of the Grand Coulee Dam flooded vast tracts of land where Indians had fished and hunted for centuries, but the government did not even give any of the irrigation water from the dam to the Indians whose land it destroyed. This is yet another example of how Native Americans suffered from the actions of the U.S. government. During World War II, Indians experienced some increases in their rights and opportunities. Approximately 25,000 Indians served in the U.S. military and were consequently able to attend colleges thanks to the GI Bill. This chance for higher education was an opportunity that largely was unavailable to Native Americans earlier. However, the GI Bill really only brought opportunity to Indian men who agreed to risk their lives fighting for a country that had oppressed them for centuries. Native Americans who didn't or couldn't go to war, on the other hand, gained nothing from this opportunity. Overall, as can be seen throughout the entirety of American history, Native Americans suffered a fairly constant lack of opportunity and rights, and although more rights were granted to them as time went on, it can be noted that even as late as the eras of the New Deal and World War II, Native Americans did not enjoy the same rights and opportunities as many other Americans. Thank you for watching the Native American section of our video series. If you'd like to explore the rights and opportunities of a different race or ethnic group, click here. If you'd like to learn about the rights and opportunities according to gender or class, click here. Or, if you finished our video series, click on my face to watch the conclusion video.